The Price is Right was meant to have a typical day. Then a college student hit $10,000 after dropping a Plinko chip. She repeated it twice more. However, everything went dark before she could drop her fourth chip. The game is fixed, a producer said as he snatched the chip in flight. Fought. The crowd froze in disbelief. There was silence for 15 minutes. America's favorite game show was almost permanently destroyed by this covert catastrophe. Additionally, CBS made a valiant effort to conceal it. Bob Stewart was employed by Worka TV in New York City in 1956. He once noticed a live auction taking place on the pavement while he was having lunch on 50th Street. He got an idea from the thrill of bidding. Imagine a game show where participants had to guess prices. The concept was dubbed the auctioneer by him. Stewart had prior radio and television experience. He had previously worked for NBC and W New. He soon met Monty Hall, who would go on to become a well-known host. Hall asked Stewart if he had any ideas after introducing him to Goodson Todman Productions and Zagsarathan Production. Often, The Price is Right is the result of the encounter. On November 26, 1956, the debut episode of the show was shown on NBC. Hosted by Bill Cullen, the pilot was a complete failure. A stagehand failed to give Cullen a signal, causing him to crash into a wall during filming. As was typical in the 1950s, NBC had already purchased the show before viewing the pilot. The network attempted to terminate it after the accident and even offered money to do so. Bill Todman and Stewart, however, declined. They made NBC stick to their agreement because they believed in the show. It was a wise choice. American game shows were struggling in the late 1950s. In 1958, a dado contender discovered a notepad containing answers intended for another player, sparking a cheating controversy. That incident led to an inquiry. It quickly became evident that a number of quiz shows were rigged. Charles Van Doren, who had been taught and provided answers beforehand, was the most well-known case on 21. The majority of high-profile quiz programs had vanished by 1960. Networks were obliged to clean up after new laws and congressional inquiries. However, The Price is Right remained intact. It began on November 26, 1956 on NBC. It has a straightforward format. Without going beyond, contestants made educated guesses about the costs of commonplace products. Cheating was not an option. The host was Bill Cullen, Don Pardo declared. The audience adored it. It expanded quickly, and by the fall of 1957, a primetime version was available. Additionally, it was the first game show to be aired in color. Others were removed from the air, but the pricing were trusted more. People thought it was sincere. At a period when viewers felt deceived, that increased its appeal even further. The ratings declined in 1963, and the show was canceled by NBC. ABC intervened promptly. They relocated the show on their network on September 9, 1963. They changed a few things. Don Pardo was replaced by Johnny Gilbert. Celebrity guests appeared on the show and performed for a selection of the crowd. However, the main concept remained unchanged. Can you guess the cost? Stay away. The primary sponsor behind the scenes was Lever Brothers, which is now Unilever. Products including Handy Andy Cleaner Whisk Detergent and Imperial Margarine were advertised on the show. They have a distinctive Dove beauty bar. Every week, even those who did not win, contestants received Dove bars. It was clever marketing. Dove became a well-known worldwide brand. The manufacturer lowered the bar size from 100 grams to 90 grams in 2022. But maintained or increased pricing. The show's first run ended on September 3, 1965, despite efforts to keep it interesting. In 1964, the primetime version had already been discontinued. It continued for another year throughout the day. The skill with which viewers were able to anticipate prices was one peculiar issue. The home viewer showcase asked participants to mail in their responses. One prize package featured a 32-way perfect tie by 1959. Producers were required to sort through sacks of mail and settle disputes over the phone and telegram. It was impossible to handle. On September 4, 1972, The Price is Right returned to television after a 7-year hiatus. It felt and looked quite different this time. It was revived by CBS as The New Price is Right. They created a new quiz format and eliminated the previous one. The emphasis shifted to estimating the cost of commonplace things. The concept was straightforward. My contestants were not allowed to exceed the real amount and were only allowed to bid in whole dollars. There were only 3 price games in the brief 30-minute presentation at first. However, that was sufficient. Not long after, it became popular. They removed the word new from the title by June 1973. The program had discovered its voice. It was authentic. It seemed just. Anyone could play the game. You didn't have to be quick or intelligent. All you needed to know was how much things cost. That's why it was successful. The Price is Right felt genuine at a time when people were still reeling from the 1950s game show cheating scandals. We also got something memorable from the show. Everything changed when Johnny Olson, the broadcaster, yelled something in 1972. "Come on down," he said. The American society adopted that simple term. The audience erupted each time he repeated it. People screamed, clapped, hugged strangers, sprung from their chairs, and ran in the direction of the stage. It was noisy. Everything was in disarray. It was thrilling. People gradually began rehearsing their responses at home. While some danced or sobbed, others performed cartwheels. Later on, the show even aired archival footage of people falling in shock or being dragged to the front. It all began with those 3 words. Then there was another significant shift. The duration of the presentation doubled on December 1st, 1975. In any case, this was a significant event, even though some sources claim the transfer may have begun as early as November 3. The prices were converted into a 1-hour show by CBS. This allowed them to play 6 price games rather than just 3. Additionally, it allowed them time for the Showcase Showdown, a brand new event. The huge wheel was introduced at that time. There were 20 segments on the wheel. In 5-cent increments, it went from 5 cents to precisely $1. As they spun the wheel, contestants attempted to approach $1 as closely as they could without going over. They received a bonus if they landed on precisely $1. Help manage the pet population, he urged. Have you had your dogs neutered or spayed? It got ingrained in the show's history. Every day, the remarks were heard by millions of viewers. CBS took a chance when Barker retired in 2007. Drew Carey, a comedian, was chosen to take over as host. In October 2007, the first episode of Carey was broadcast. Longtime fans weren't sure at first. Barker had been composed and elegant. Carey was more laid back and informal, but he eventually settled into a groove. He has hosted over 3,269 episodes to date. He maintained the essence of the show. Although he introduced his own humor and style, he respected history. It all goes away, Carey stated in an interview with People magazine. All day long, it's simply vibrating. On The Price is Right, an incredible event occurred on July 22, 2008. One of the college students volunteered to play Plinko. Her first chip fell into the $10,000 slot machine. The audience applauded. The same thing happened to her second chip. Her third chip then struck the $10,000 slot as well. It had never occurred before. 3 consecutive flawless drops. Already she had earned $30,000. Everyone in the audience stood up. They were yelling. It had a magical feel to it. However, everything changed as she was about to drop her 4th chip. On stage, a floor director rushed. The chip was smacked out of the air as he pushed forward. Everybody froze. "The game is fixed," he added, leaning dangerously close to Drew Carey. The competitor was instructed to sit at the bottom of the stage after being swiftly removed from the Plinko platform. Without saying a word, Drew left. The curtain came down. The lights in the studio went out. Although he acknowledged he had no idea what was going on, the announcer made an effort to quiet the throng. There was silence in the room for 15 minutes or so. Why the game had halted in the midst of a momentous occasion was a mystery to everyone. No one had anticipated the strangeness of the truth. The show had paused for 2 weeks before to that taping. The marketing team filmed advertisements for the Price is Right video game in the studio during the break. They rigged the Plinko board to give the commercial an interesting appearance. Then fishing lines were utilized on either side of the $10,000 slot machine. The chips were always directed to the center by these lines. It was a standard advertising ploy. However, no one took down the lines when the actual show's filming resumed. The board was still rigged, but nobody noticed. Not the stage management, not the crew, not Drew. Before those 3 consecutive immaculate $10,000 drops, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It's nearly difficult to have that kind of streak. The producers were aware that there must be a problem. They halted the game in the middle of the tape because of this. Fortunately, CBS Standards and Procedures took over. They decided to give the competitor her $30,000 back. That decision probably prevented a legal quagmire and prevented the audience from abandoning the program. After that, the crew reshot the entire game after removing the fishing lines. The competitor used all 5 chips to play Plinko once again. She took home $3,000 this time. Viewers did not witness any of the chaos when the episode aired on December 5, 2008. Everything was cleaned up. The reshot version appeared in the final. Nobody at home was aware that a catastrophe had nearly occurred. For years, the story was kept under wraps. Only the individuals working at that studio were aware of the Price is Right's near scandal. However, the concert was able to go since the team responded quickly and effectively to the issue. Later in 2021, Drew Carey discussed that day in an interview with SiriusXM. "I'm going to jail," he declared. "I'm going to lose my job. A scandal is going to occur." In 2007, he replaced Bob Barker as host, but he had barely been there for a year. The show might be shut down, he thought. Due to quiz show scandals in the 1950s, game show regulations are stringent. As a result of those incidents, federal legislation outlawed game fixing in all its forms. Drew was immediately aware that this error could lead to serious issues. There were other scandals, though. Bob Barker was one of the most dependable television personalities for many years. He became well known and presented The Price is Right for 35 years. However, something quite different was taking place behind the scenes, even if viewers witnessed the charm and enthusiasm on film. Women who worked on the show started speaking up in the 1990s. They spoke of a fear-filled, discriminatory, and harassing work environment. Diane Parkinson, a model, sued Barker for $8 million in 1994. She said that he coerced her into having sex with him. It was 3 years long. Parkinson said Barker threatened to fire her if she didn't comply with his demands. She claimed that in between performances, he summoned her to his dressing room and insisted on oral intercourse. Barker was in his 70s at the time. He insisted that Parkinson was the one who had pursued him and denied everything. She wanted to be the next Mrs. Bob Barker, he claimed. Parkinson's health issues and legal expenses caused him to eventually dismiss the lawsuit. However, her situation brought to light something that many had been silent about for years. In 1995, Holly Hallstrom, another model, lost her job. Medication-induced weight gain was cited as the cause. However, Hallstrom thought that her refusal to back Barker during the Parkinson case was the true cause. She filed a complaint against him on July 2, 1996. She charged him with emotional abuse, breach of contract, medical discrimination, age discrimination, and sex discrimination, The court battle lasted for nearly a decade. Barker's attorneys continued to file motions to keep her out. Settlements were given to her, she claimed, but only provided she remained silent. She declined. In order to maintain her right to speak, she decided to accept less money. Hallstrom was paid a settlement of several $1 million in October 2005. Later, she established a nonprofit to support those who experience workplace abuse but lack the resources to defend themselves. Others on the show were affected by Hallstrom's case. After making statements in support of her, models Kathleen Bradley and Janice Pennington were both let go. Since 1972, Pennington had been involved with the show. Bradley was the show's first permanent black model, having joined in 1990. Cheryl Paris and Linda Reger, production assistants, were also fired. They had also advocated for Hallstrom. It was an obvious message. You would be forced out if you opposed Barker. Sharon Freeman, another employee, brought her own claim. She said that after experiencing inappropriate behavior and sexual harassment on set, she was let go. Model Anisha Cole also filed a lawsuit in 2011. She brought a lawsuit alleging 7 different things, including unjust attention and sexual harassment. She claimed that she had been mistreated by 2 of the show's producers. producers. Even years after the initial cases, Cole's case demonstrated that the issues persisted. The show's culture wasn't just harmful to women, it was discriminatory as well. Hallstrom and others testified under oath that the call sheets had a letter B next to the names of the black contestants. The majority of the white competitors had already been selected when they were introduced in the third act. Barker didn't want a lot of black participants on show, according to Hallstrom. As a joke, she added, he would flee whenever they attempted to embrace him. However, the joke lacked humor. It was a component of an overly long permitted trend. 4 months following Barker's retirement in 2007, a long-standing employee made a statement. Deborah Curling had 24 years of experience as a contender screener. She sued for emotional abuse, sexual harassment, and racial discrimination. She claimed that she had reached her breaking point because of the show's culture. The Price is Right crew is behind the colorful set and the beaming host. We had a very different problem. There was a pattern of abuse and silence in the lawsuits. Others spent years of their lives battling unwelcome court fights while others lost their careers and health. In 2007, Drew Carey assumed control of The Price is Right. He was regarded as a humorous and amiable host for many years. He joked with each competitor and maintained a smile during each wheel spin. However, that image began to deteriorate in 2025. Several sources made grave allegations on March 21st. They claimed that Carey had ruined the workplace. Employees said that he frequently screamed at people on set. It occasionally occurred during tapings. At other instances, it took place behind closed doors. At least 7 crew members were considering filing a lawsuit. They said that this conduct had persisted for several months. There was tension behind the scenes. Carey's mood began to change in late 2024, according to production staff. On certain days, he was cheerful and gregarious. He may suddenly become aloof or irate the following day. He left the set in the middle of production in February 2025. There were delays as a result of the 45-minute stoppage. The chosen contenders were already in line. Following that day, employees began alerting one another of Carey's mood through silent signs. In early 2025, 3 longtime crew members departed. They all cited the harsh work environment as the reason. The show itself started to seem strange. One episode among the 2024 that aired on December 12th stood out for all the wrong reasons. It got popular on the internet very soon. On Bidders Row, 2 competitors placed identical bids. $10,000 was guessed by one person as though it were an actual sum. A competitor was unable to adhere to the fundamental guidelines during safecrackers. Carey had to repeat the explanations. "Oh, I did," she said after winning a television set. "What location is it?" Ignoring the audience, another pushover competitor shoved each block off the stage. Nobody. Could you believe it? Her pricing game was only won by one individual, Linda. In just 2 days, that program received over 2.3 million views on YouTube. Then February 2025 arrived. Contestants were asked to guess the cost of an iPhone 6 in one episode. $7,500 was the first person's response. $0. 0 was the second guess. $7,501. The real cost came to $1,969. The audience let out a gasp. "I hope the marketing folks at Apple are watching this," Carey replied, glancing at the camera. While the audience chuckled, opinions on the internet were divided. Some found it amusing. Carey went too far, according to others. They didn't enjoy watching the host ridicule the competitors on national television. In a single day, that clip received over 300,000 views. November 20th, 2024 saw a lesser controversy. Agnes, one of the competitors, was playing Line M Up. To win a car, she had to arrange numbers. Carey replied, "You have to change this to a 2 because the 4 is wrong," following her initial prediction. The crowd then started yelling. "They want you to make this a 0, Carey informed her. He repeated it when she inquired if it was correct. Agnes won because she made the change. Later, a fan accused Carey of being overly helpful. Although crew members claimed it wasn't against the rules, CBS mentioned nothing about the incident. There is no rule against repeating what the crowd says, however, hosts are not allowed to direct players. Fans swiftly referred to The Price is Right's October 23, 2024 showcase round as one of its worst in recent memory. Anissa and Lewis, the two finalists, had persevered to the very end. However, what they saw as the curtain came up was not appropriate for the situation. Iceland, Ireland, and New Orleans were among the destinations offered in the initial presentation. Great locations by themselves, yet seasoned viewers saw something was lacking. Not a beach, no luxurious resort, no tropical paradise. Neither did the second showcase. It came with a Mitsubishi Mirage, a stereo system, and a set of diamond jewelry. Online followers claim that car was the most affordable one ever seen on the show. On camera, Anissa appeared quite happy. It wasn't just her either. Social media took off. The producers were accused by viewers of using shortcuts, attempting to save costs before the 10th, 0th episode of the show airs in February 2025. Some referred to it as a betrayal of the legacy of the game. Some simply referred to it as lazy. In any case, the harm was done. People had been disappointed by the display. That season, there were other controversies. Longtime commentator Rich Fields made a straightforward error in another episode. He referred to an HPPC as a Dell when discussing a prize package. Safe, isn't it? Not on this program. Generally speaking, the price is correct. The contender receives whatever was announced rather than what was actually displayed if a prize description is inaccurate. There was a twist to that one-word error, which cost the performance thousands of dollars. The competitor had placed an almost $5,000 overbid. That would have disqualified them under normal circumstances. However, the prize had to be given out regardless of the inaccuracy. This was not an isolated incident. It demonstrated how tightly the program runs. Everything needs to be flawless, including the price, the goods, and the words. One minor error might cause major problems and incur significant expenses. However, the biggest surprise usually occurs after the game. It's possible for contestants to walk off stage grinning. But when the tax notice comes, reality sets in. California state taxes are the first step in taxing each prize on the show according to its full retail value. The contender cannot even touch their prize till the money is received. That happy moment can quickly devolve into fear. Kyle, a teacher, won a $157,300 Audi rate Spider in 2013. It was the most costly prize in the history of the show at the time. The bill then arrived. She owes the IRS $34,453, her native state of Washington $14,915, and California $12,000. Taxes totaling more than $61,000. A financial alternative is not available to contestants. It's all about the prize. A lot of winners simply leave. Something happened back in 2008 that permanently altered the show. Terry Neese, a retired weatherman, put in a demonstration offer of precisely $23,743. He punched the last $1 into the number. A 17-foot camper, a pool table, and a karaoke machine were the prizes. The output stopped when the total was disclosed. No one moved for 45 minutes. Producers were certain it had to be a cheat behind the scenes. In fact, Kathy Greco, one of them, fled the stage in shock. Drew Carey, the host, was also unimpressed. He later said that he was enraged and clenched his teeth to declare the victory. Neese, however, maintained that there was no trick. He had committed his wedding day and his wife's birth month to memory, as well as price patterns and numbers that held emotional significance. The show cleared him following a thorough inquiry. Nevertheless, the makers wished to prevent it from happening again. In order to keep contestants guessing, they started introducing new things and altering pricing more frequently after that day. Behind the whirling wheels and colorful ensemble, the price is reasonable, has always been a machine with precise calibration. However, even minor flaws in the system, like a poor prize lineup, a verbal blunder, an unexpected tax bill, or an excellent bid, have the power to upend the entire system. Millions of people are watching when it happens.